All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are taking a deep dive into a true chess masterclass. Now look, if you've ever felt like your games are just this chaotic mess of moving pieces around until someone finally blunders, well, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to channel a bit of that highly energetic, slightly irreverent chess thug persona from our source material today, because we need to completely rewire how you think about the board. My goal for this session, it's simple. I want to take those low elo brains and literally transform them into ruthless, calculating, tactical machines. Let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this playbook. We've systematically organized the chaos of over 30 rapid-fire tactics into 5 easy-to-digest strategic buckets: hunting the vulnerable king, tricky maneuvers and manipulations, the art of the sacrifice, defensive swindles and escapes, and finally, endgame magic and promotions. So, Section 1, hunting the vulnerable king, smashing open the enemy's defenses. Now, to hunt the king, you obviously need to know where to look. Right out of the gate, you want to target the f2 and f7 squares. Initially, these are only defended by the king itself, which makes them massively vulnerable to early tactical strikes. Second, we have to call out some absolute nonsense right now. Beginners mistakenly think castled king are safe forever. They are definitely not. A perfectly timed sacrifice knight or queen can rip open a castled position in seconds. And finally, keep an eye out for the chilling back rank king. You know, when an opponent's king is stuck behind its own pawns on that last row, a single rook or queen dropping down there can literally end the game instantly. And this brilliantly illustrates the concept of a mating net. Our source material cheekily jokes that a mating net is what Spider-Man does when he's trying to get a date. But on the chessboard, it's when your opponent's king is trapped in an inescapable mating sequence. Even if the checkmate doesn't happen on this exact turn, the net is set, the escape routes are totally cut off, and their doom is mathematically guaranteed. But to weave that net, you need your foundational multi-piece attacks. So you've got the fork, where one of your pieces attacks 2 or more of theirs at the exact same time. Then there's the pin, which paralyzes a piece because moving it would expose something even more valuable behind it. The skewer is kind of the reverse of that. You're forcing a highly valuable piece to run away, leaving the weaker piece behind it to die. And then, man, there's the windmill. This is honestly one of the most brutal tactics in chess history. It's a devastating loop of discovered checks that essentially lets you vacuum up your opponent's pieces while they just helplessly shuffle their king back and forth. Moving on to Section 2, tricky maneuvers and manipulations, slick moves for the upper hand. Now, what's really interesting here is this incredibly fancy German word, Zwischenzug. Don't let the pronunciation intimidate you, it just translates to a slick in-between move, and it heavily punishes low elo brains who just operate on autopilot. Think about it. If someone attacks your queen, the autopilot response is to move it or blindly recapture something. But its Zwischenzug interrupts that totally expected sequence with a devastating intermediate check or a sudden threat that completely throws the opponent off guard and immediately flips the advantage. We also really need to contrast 2 subtle manipulation tactics that sound kind of similar but operate very differently in practice: the decoy and the deflection. A decoy is all about luring a piece in. You bait the opponent, maybe you even sacrifice a pawn just to drag their king or queen onto a square where you can brutally fork them. Deflection, on the other hand, is about kicking a piece out. You attack a defending piece just to force it to step away from guarding a crucial square, leaving the back door completely wide open for your actual attack. So, let's take a quick interactive pause here. I want you to imagine this scenario on the board. You have this brilliant checkmate lined up, but your opponent has a seemingly impenetrable knight just stubbornly defending that winning square. Everything else is perfect, but that one piece is ruining your entire life. What do you do? Well, to quote our enthusiastic source material directly, you just smoke his ass. It's literally called the removal of the defender, and it is brilliantly simple. If a piece is causing you problems and holding their entire defense together, don't overthink it. You just capture it, rip it off the board, and unlock your winning tactic. That brings us to Section 3, the art of the sacrifice, giving up material for the Gucci win. We can really group these sacrifices into a few distinct buckets. A clearance sacrifice is when you toss a piece straight into the fire just to free up the physical square it was standing on, making way for an even deadlier piece to slide in. An exchange sacrifice is temporarily giving up a more valuable rook for a lesser knight or bishop just to break a stubborn defense. And then there's the ultimate flex, the queen sacrifice. Look, giving up the wife might make her temporarily unhappy to leave the board, but trust me on this, you'll be feeling completely Gucci when it results in an unavoidable, spectacular checkmate. So, the crucial point to take away is knowing the value of your pieces relative to the current situation, which perfectly explains the desperado tactic. If you realize one of your pieces is hopelessly trapped and doomed to die on the very next turn no matter what you do, well, it becomes a desperado. You might as well hurl it at the opponent's material and drag a pawn or a bishop down with it. Go out in a blaze of glory. Okay, here's another classic big brain versus low elo brain test for you. You're looking at the board, and you notice your opponent has blundered. There is a completely defenseless hanging knight just sitting right there on c6. Nobody is guarding it. Do you just snap it up? Don't be hasty. A hanging piece is very often just bait. Our source explicitly warns us that snatching a free piece is entirely useless if doing so makes you totally blind to a forced mate on the other side of the board. Always, always take a second look. If they are giving you something for free, you gotta ask yourself what they are trying to distract you from. Next up, Section 4, Defensive Swindles and Escapes. Equalizing when there ain't nothing you can do. Let me tell you, the most glorious defensive swindle in chess is this stalemate. This happens when a player has absolutely no legal moves left to make, but their king is technically not in check. Bam! The game instantly ends in a draw. You can actually intentionally sacrifice all your remaining pieces just to trap your own king and force a stalemate. As our source hilariously notes, this incredibly frustrating draw often results in your opponent footing a $1,000 bill for a completely smashed laptop. But you have other survival tools too. There is the perpetual check, where you just check your opponent's king over and over and over in an infinite loop until they get so annoyed they finally agree to a draw. There is interference, where you desperately throw a piece right between two attacking lines just to block their line of sight. And crucially, there is simplification. If you're winning, but you're getting dangerously low on the clock in a blitz game, just wildly trade away your pieces. Sacrifice a bishop for a pawn if it forces the board into a brain-dead, easy endgame where you couldn't possibly blunder your time away. Conversely, when you are the one trying to break an opponent's defense, look for overloading. Often, a player will force a single overworked piece, like a queen or a rook, to hold their entire defensive structure together. When you identify that structural beam, you just add one more threat to it. The overloaded piece will physically snap. It simply can't defend everything at once, and something critical is going to drop. Let's move to our final phase. Section 5. Endgame magic and promotions. Finishing the fight. To capture the vibrant and slightly ridiculous humor of our source material regarding endgame dominance, they describe endgame tactics exactly like this. It is exactly what the Avengers used to smack Thanos up. I love that. The endgame requires absolute precision, cold calculation, and literal superhero-level foresight to actually finish the fight. A huge part of this endgame magic is knowing the obscure pawn rolls, specifically en passant, or as our source wonderfully mispronounces it as an ongoing inside joke, in peasant. This is a super tricky special rule where a pawn can capture an adjacent enemy pawn that just tried to sprint past it by moving 2 squares. Beginners constantly forget this rule even exists, and using it correctly is very often the exact difference between a win and a loss. And finally, we reach the holy grail, marching your pawn all the way to the end of the board for a promotion. But slow down for a second. Making a queen automatically is a massive rookie mistake if doing so accidentally stalemates the enemy king. This is where under-promotion comes in to save the day. Sometimes, promoting that pawn to a knight instead of a queen instantly forks the enemy king and queen, securing the wins safely and stylishly. You have to calculate the board, not just blindly reach for the most powerful piece. And there you have it, a structured, highly strategic breakdown of the most critical tactical concepts on the board, straight from our source material. From smoking out the defender to swindling a miraculous stalemate, you now have the playbook. So the only real question left is, which of these big brain tactics are you going to use to outsmart your opponent and level up your elo today? Get out there and start calculating.